Not entirely sure how I feel about this beanie. We're gonna go with it. Good morning, good evening, and good night, everybody. My name is Sarah, and we have a book to talk about today, The Apothecary's Curse by Barbara Barnett. Now, get this out of the way, not a big fan of this book. I love the concept, I love the design of the cover, but it's not the best book in the world, and it's like, it could have been so much better, and that's probably why I'm going to be a little slightly harsher than I should be to this, because I felt like it had so much potential and it didn't really carry through. Now, this book follows the story of two immortal people who were once normal and somehow drank an elixir from a magical book that granted them immortality. It's not entirely clear how this elixir worked, because they both drank different things, and one of them drank half of something that had killed his wife. That character would be named Simon. He's not the main focus of the story, but he is what I would call the main character, because the story does seem to be more from his opinion than anything else. Back during the Victorian era, Simon was married to his beloved wife, who he loved with all his heart, and she had cancer though, and he was doing everything in his power to heal her, but nothing was working. So eventually he just decided to go to Apothecary and beg for some sort of solution. The Apothecary himself is the second immortal person of this book, but we don't realize it. Eventually, Simon gets his hands on the book that has the elixir that should cure her, and he manages to convince his wife to drink it. The cancer's gone, but she still dies. It's not explained that well, but it just kind of happens. And so in his grief, he tries to drink the rest of the elixir. And he becomes immortal, which doesn't make much sense, but we're going to go with it because it sets up the rest of the book. Now, the other main character, the older one of the two immortal people, he became immortal when he was trying to find a cure for the plague. And, well, things didn't exactly turn out for him well within the next couple decades. You see, he survived the plague and everything else, but eventually someone realized that he was immortal, and they kidnapped him, stole half his possessions, burned his shop to the ground, and tortured him. And it's that torturous backstory that it keeps reoccurring throughout this book. This book is formatted in a very strange way. We get a couple chapters in present day and a couple chapters in the Victorian era. And, well, we're meant to stitch the story together, which is fairly easy, but, again, it's not that well. It feels like we keep getting repeating information. We don't need to hear 20 chapters of the same fact that he was getting tortured, he was being abused. We can get that in one chapter. It can be a gruesome chapter, guys. It doesn't need to span for that long. There are 54 chapters in this book as well, and it's not all back and forth between present and past. Sometimes you get multiple chapters in the same story. Here's my problem with that, though. It's the same story. A chapter should be dedicated to its own arc, its own story. And it just kind of feels choppy the way it's divided up. I'd be fine with a couple short chapters and a couple long chapters, just not this. Now, the modern day story has one of the immortal people getting injured in a motorcycle accident, and he doesn't really come out of it that well. People find his body and they bring him to the hospital. They're realizing that he's still alive, and he recovers way too quickly for anyone to ever imagine. People pass him off as dead. They start calling him the Miracle Man. This gets the attention of a company who's trying, to put it bluntly, find immortality. They want the Fountain of Youth. They want what these two people have, and they will do anything in their power to get it. That obsession started off with part of the company finding a diary from the Mad Doctor who tortured the older of the two main characters. And it feels so forced, like there's not much motivation for these characters to do what they do. and yet they do it, and it's weird. This also brings up a couple moral and ethical issues that are addressed by the characters, which I like, but again, it could have been done better, but at the very least they were addressed. And the character who addresses them ends up being the older of the two immortal beings' love interest. And this is where all the coincidences come in, and there's so many coincidences in this book, guys. It feels cheesy. I'm sorry, it does. So this girl is from a family who has in their possession the magical book that the elixirs have come from, but she doesn't realize it. It's been in her cousin's attic for who knows how long, and it's unclear how she got it, and you will understand that in a minute. Well, let's just say she runs into the Miracle Man asking for some of his DNA samples, being nice about the process of what her company wants. He says no, but she's persistent, and then eventually she realizes this guy runs a rare book in an antique shop. So she takes this mystery book that she has and asks him to decode it. That's when he realizes it's his book. Stuff happens. He has to pretend he doesn't know what the book is, but clearly he knows. They end up spending so much time together, they get attracted to each other, and this is where my main problem of this book comes in. You see, I was fine with this book up until this moment. It wasn't the best book in the world, but it had some things going for it. We end up realizing that these two characters are related. And then the very next chapter, they end up... They don't... But they... You know what I mean. They're very clearly in a relationship at this point. And then the very chapter after that, the characters realize they're in a relationship. And the characters realize they're related. You see, the girl, she's the some-odd great-granddaughter of the immortal being's sister. So, yeah, there's that, and that's kind of, I don't know, it was a fine book until that point, and then they did that, and then I'm just like, this is making me uncomfortable, I'm sorry, stop it, and then, I don't know, things get really jumbled from there. Stuff happens, things happen, they end up figuring out that this guy's immortal, they end up figuring out that the company's trying to track them down, and then things kind of dwindle off. The ending of this book is kind of bizarre. It's not something I can easily explain, because I'm not entirely sure what happened myself. They got rid of the stereotypical bad guy, and now they're moving. One of them did end up dying, which kind of goes against what this book is about, but he gives himself up through the means of the book, which makes sense, but at the same time finds really cheesy. Simon was haunted by his dead wife, the person who he tried to save but ultimately ended up killing, and through the hundreds of years that the ghost has been haunting him, she has resented him, but at the very last moment, she forgave him. It's very strange. I feel like I could have paid attention to this book more, but I didn't want to. This book was not interesting to me. I'm sorry. I'm not sorry. I didn't like this book. Overall, I give this book 4.5 out of 13. I like the idea. I like the cover. That's kind of it. Yeah, there's not much more to say about this book. It could have been so much, and it's not, and that's what bothers me the most, honestly, out of everything. If I went into this with, like, it's just another book, probably would have given it, like, a 5 or a 6, but I don't know, it just isn't. No. Thank you so much for watching my review. If you have any suggestions on what you want me to read next, leave them down in the comment section below. While there, don't forget to hit like and subscribe. And after all, good night, good evening, and good morning, everybody.